So this is how this is going to go. I'm going to talk for about 5 minutes because I'm introducing Janet, right? But I'm going to go off script for a minute, so bear with me. But this is an official bio, right? So Janet Jakobsen is Ann Whitney Olin Professor of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies and Director of the Center for Research on Women at Barnard College for now, where she has also served, we want to keep that going, where she has also served as Dean for Faculty Diversity and Development. She is the author of Working Alliances and the Politics of Difference, Diversity, and Feminist Ethics. With Ann Pellegrini, she co-wrote Love the Sin, Sexual Regulation and the Limits of Religious Tolerance, and co-edited Secularisms. And with Elizabeth Castelli, she co-edited Interventions, Academics, and Activists' Response to Violence. She has held fellowships from the American Association of University Women, the Center for the Humanities at Wesleyan University, and the Center for the Study of Values in Public Life at Harvard Divinity School, and is also taught as a visiting professor at Harvard University and Wesleyan University. Before entering the academy, she was a policy analyst and activist in Washington, D.C. So that's a very short bio. You can read a longer one online. Now I'm going to go off script for a minute because I'm a little upset that I'm coming after everybody has already said how much they love and adore Janet, right? So I had this brilliant idea in our staff meeting that I was like, we really need to let everybody know who doesn't know Janet how fabulous she is. So we have to make this big introduction. Now everybody has already, fallen all over her, so I'm just gonna clean it up, right? So anyway, okay, I'm back on script. Okay, so that's Janet Jakobsen, the scholar. I'd like to take a moment to speak to who Janet is as a leader, a mentor, and a friend. I'm gonna go off script for a minute. Okay, seriously, by show of hands, how many people love their boss? Only BCRW staff? Okay. I'm just saying, I am the luckiest admin at Barnard College. Just saying. Okay. On script. Okay. I came to BCRW 6 years ago with a small voice and limited confidence. Janet encouraged me to view my world through different lenses and helped me to realize that the center was a safe place and space to expand and explore. I learned very quickly that Janet had cultivated a space where very unique voices could be heard and where grassroots activisms could thrive. In these past 6 years, I've watched Janet's vision of social justice manifest in our journals, awesome conferences, salons, and lectures that the center sponsors. Under Janet's leadership, the center has grown tremendously. And along the way, she's managed to personally touch my life, as well as the lives of many of you, as you've already attested to 1,000 times. So many of you are sitting in this room tonight. So without further ado, please welcome our fierce, fearless, fabulous leader, Dr. J.
Thank you. I did have one plan, which was to say that and sit down. In part because I'm overwhelmed and have been all day. And I also know it's the end of the day. But then I realized I have a lot of very specific thank yous to say, including, and especially, where did she go? She's behind the pole now, to Pamela Phillips for that beautiful introduction. It is an honor to be introduced by someone I admire as much as I admire Pam Phillips. And that simply adds to what has been a wonderful and profound and, for me, quite strange day. As Tina mentioned at the beginning, for 15 years I have stood up here at the beginning of every BCRW event and said, I am Janet Jakobsen and I am the director of the Barnard Center for Research on Women. She said it was uncounted times. I did a brief calculation. And I think it was about 350 times. And this is the kind of thing that one gets used to. It becomes sort of a habit, and it can be hard to break. David Hobson, who worked at the center when I first started, went on to become our associate director and then moved on and does all the print publications for the college. If anything comes out beautiful, it's because of David. And he once answered his home phone, "Hello, Women's Center." You can imagine this was a while ago. It was a time when people, A, had home phones, and B, when BCRW was known colloquially here as the Barnard Women's Center. I have been known to introduce myself at social occasions mistakenly and without completely thinking through the context by saying, I'm Janet Jakobsen and I'm the director of the Barnard Center for Research on Women. But, you know, perhaps it wasn't a mistake to say this at a social occasion, because one of the things, and I think you saw this with Pam's introduction, that has been most wonderful about these years of working at BCRW has been the social relations among the staff, with faculty colleagues, and with the many collaborative partners that you've heard from today. The other reason to just sit down today is because they are all so smart. And so first, I want to say thank you to everybody who has participated in this day. BCRW has simply been a wonderful place to work, and I am convinced at this moment that these 15 years will have been, and Christina can later explain to you the grammatical formation have been, the highlight of my working life. My transition mentor, Catherine Acey, our senior activist fellow, claims that that's not true and I need to move on from that idea, but right here today I believe that that is true. When I first arrived in 2000, David Hobson worked with the irrepressible Liz Budnitz. They were my two core workers. My first introduction of one of them to work at the center was from Liz, who sent me a most enthusiastic email to make plans for my arrival. And the ebullience, I can't describe this email to you in any other way, of the message told me that I was headed to a very special place. Not only was working with Liz Budnitz and David Hobson a uniquely enlivening experience, but I also had the good fortune to work with Liz Boyland, who was the provost of Barnard College for 16 years, as my boss. So I put my hand up when Pam asked. I've been very fortunate. And also, Flora Davidson at the time was the associate provost, and she was a key member of the BCRW advisory board, had been for a long time, and said to me when I started, you know, Janet, the center is the radical arm of feminism at Barnard. So I have done my best to live up to that tradition. And I was also very fortunate from the very beginning to have wonderful collaborative partners in both academic and activist worlds from the very start of my time at BCRW, including Amber Hollabaugh, who worked with me and Robin Weigman to put together an early working group that included artists and activists and academics. And it included Kate Bornstein, Chandan Reddy, Sharon Holland. And we came to call it Cell 17 after another early Boston group, Cell 16. Out of that project came a further conjunction of projects, and I thank Tina for highlighting that word, with Lauren Berlant at the University of Chicago and with my colleagues at the University of Arizona, Miranda Joseph and Liz Kennedy. And those early groups actually informed a lot of what you have seen here today. So one of the things that I will miss most about this particular job is coming into the BCRW offices and working with all of the people who have made up the staff over the last 15 years, as well as with these collaborative partners. And I want to, there's not a lot of lists in here of thank yous, but I do want to thank all of them in the order in which they came to the center. David Hobson, Liz Budnitz, Hope Dector, Grace Glennie, Gisela Fasado, Lucy Traynor, Pamela Phillips, Catherine Sammy, Ann Jonas, Tammy Navarro, Nietzsche Yin, and Shay Gossett. Please join me in thanking them. Each of them is incredibly smart and talented in very distinctive ways, and in the midst of all the serious work we've done, and that you've heard about today, they've also just been such fun to work with. Indeed, I have often thought it is as if working at BCRW is like working in the best possible workplace situation comedy. In the early years, my good friend and quick-witted co-author Ann Pellegrini worked upstairs in the Department of Women's Studies. And she truly is quick-witted. She offered a pun not just in this last panel, but in her question to the very first panel of the day before she had, I think, even fully woken up. When she would come through the door, she would set in motion the classic mechanism of situation comedy in which the door opens and soon everyone is laughing. And in fact, that is exactly what happened at BCRW very frequently. All of the incarnations of the BCRW team that have followed have had a similar feel of fun. Of late, our office conversation has turned to parks and recreation as the model for how we should do our work. You won't be surprised to hear that I saw myself as the Amy Poehler character, Leslie Knope, the overly earnest Midwesterner, trying to make something happen by working with a small and somewhat quirky team to make the world a better, more beautiful, fun-filled place with more parks. I was really honored that one of the working groups at lunchtime, in fact, suggested that parks were the answer. So I was there. And when at the most recent Scholar and Feminist, I participated in a workshop on freedom schools. And out of that, I came with the idea of what my vision of social justice was, and I named it as more fun for more people. Despite these aspirations, the BCRW staff held, and this is unanimous among them, by the way, that I was not like Leslie Knope, but rather like this character. The somewhat depressive, somewhat antisocial person with libertarian politics, Ron Swanson. And after today, I have to agree, you will see that Ron is asked, not to worry, I have a permit for what I'm doing in the park. It says I can do what I want, Ron. So when Anne was playing the everybody says no, I say yes, it was like, yeah, Ron Swanson, I guess it's me. Now, it hasn't been all fun and hilarity at the Barnard Center for Research on Women. There have been many serious moments as well. One of the most important of which was when I did an interview with the producers of the Today Show on the topic of women in hair. Or, as we refer to it in the office, the moment in which I was Beyonce's hair consultant. This is not from the actual thing, but it is circa 2010 when this took place. They interviewed me for 4 hours for what was probably a 20-second clip, and as I was talking, it morphed into Beyonce waving. The thing I like about this is the reactions that I got from many of my longtime friends and loved ones, including people in this room, one of whom reportedly spilled her cereal bowl. You know who you are. But my favorite was from my college friend, Susan Adler-Funk, who is also here today. She sent me the following email. My sister-in-law, Wendy, said she saw you on the Today Show the other morning talking about hair. Did you change your field? And in fact, one of the great opportunities about the BCRW is that you could work on any topic at the BCRW. I mean, I really had to reach for the hair stuff. I started talking about Mary Douglas and religious symbolism. They then called back and wanted to interview Mary Douglas. I was sorry to inform them she had died. But the range of topics alone has made this job such a pleasure. So these are the inaugural issues of the journal, The Scholar and Feminist Online. Laura Levitt talked about the one that she did, Changing Focus, Family Photography and American Jewish Identity. Margaret Mead's legacy on the centenary of Margaret Mead's birth, which we did with the anthropology department here. This then made up the Scholar and Feminist Online. I love how we've gone in and out of the technological forefront. You'll notice this was when the online was called the World Wide Web, and not been able to make the microphones work, so it's been good. Other collaborations have followed. Gender on Ice with our colleague in physics and astronomy, Laura Kay. Public Sentiments with Anne Pellegrini and Anne Svetkovich, the Zordnell Hurston issue with Monica Miller, Josephine Baker with Kayama Glover, an issue on immigration and politics with Nefertiti Tadiar, a new queer agenda, which you also heard about earlier, and then an issue on which was with Queers for Economic Justice and Lisa Dugan and her co-editors, and then one on reproductive technologies with Beck Jordan Young. So you can see in this range, and also just the wonder of these colleagues who would collaborate with you to produce this work. It's been such an honor. This is the forthcoming issue, which Tina also mentioned, which is on the worlds of Entasaki Shange with the incomparable Kim Hall, Monica Miller, and Yvette Christianza. And I do encourage you to sign up for the Scholar and Feminist Online, because if you sign up for our emails when this comes out, which will be in just a few weeks, you will get an email and be the first to read it. The fall of 2001 was a particularly momentous time, so I had come in 2000. That fall, the opening speaker was on September 13th, 2001. But we had the good fortune, and this is due to Liz Budnitz's recommendation, and I think it has resonances with this last conversation, to have the anti-death penalty activist Sister Helen Prejean, who was the subject of the book and movie Dead Man Walking, to be that speaker on September 13th, 2001. We also had the good fortune that Sister Helen was already in the area, and we drove. The bridges had been closed on September 11th. The airports were still closed on the 13th, but we drove across the bridge to New Jersey, picked her up, and brought her back for the talk. And the reason it was so important to have her here is because she has an amazing ability to acknowledge the horror of violence while maintaining that suffering violence need not ineluctably lead to more violence in response. The first question that evening came from a student who reported that she felt overwhelmed. The gravity and enormity of the issues of violence and response that we suddenly faced were overwhelming. Yet she had just started college. Sister Helen's response is one that has actually helped to guide me in my time at BCRW. And she said, just find one thing. You don't have to solve the problems of the world, but you can find one thing that you can do to contribute to addressing a violent world. She told us that she had not expected to become a renowned anti-death penalty activist. She had simply been asked to write a letter to a person on death row. Following that step and all of the steps that opened up in response to it, she helped to create a national dialogue on capital punishment and on new ways of thinking about justice. Just find one thing, not bad advice. Later that fall, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of BCRW, and we were very proud of the aesthetics. You know, one thing, it's like looking back at your old outfits. But anyway, it was great. And in fact, this is remains one of my highlights here. We had 500 people in the gym. We had, you'll see over here, an all-women jazz band. And each of my predecessors as director, Jane Gould, Tema Kaplan, and Leslie Cowman, spoke, along with longtime center supporter and former chair of Barnard's Board of Trustees, Ellie Elliott. And the keynote speaker was the renowned poet and activist June Jordan. June was a Barnard alum, although she chose not to graduate. And many years before, she had delivered the center's first Helen Rogers Reed lecture with Alice Walker. And Jordan's remarks on that first occasion were notes of a Barnard dropout. On this occasion, she gave us a deeply moving lecture, Some of Us Did Not Die. She suggested that living on after September 11th, 2001 requires a new awareness of the interdependence of the social world. As she says in the collection of essays in which her talk here at Barnard was published, quote, "And then I understood that the answer is yes, yes, yes." You can see why I chose this quote. Going on with June Jordan's word, I care because I want you to care about me. I care because I have become aware of my absolute dependency on you, whoever you are, for the outcome of my social, my democratic experience, end quote. In addition to being beautiful and evocative, that lecture suggested that as a cutting-edge feminist institution, the first of its kind, founded in 1971, the center had a certain responsibility to bring a feminist analysis to the question of violence and response, war and peace, women and religion, that moved to the center of public discourse in the United States that September. Fortunately, our good colleague, who you just saw, Elizabeth Costelli, had been working on these issues already through offering a course on the topic, and she suggested that we bring Nobel Peace Laureate Jody Williams to campus. What resulted was an amazing project involving almost 30 scholars and activists who worked on questions of responding to violence in different areas of the world. This convening led to a book. All my books have beautiful covers, as you can see. Love the Sin, looks great, by the way. A book, Interventions, Activists and Academics Respond to Violence, that Elizabeth and I edited, and a wholly new line of work that we came to call New Feminist Solutions. This series emphasizes collaboration with partners to address both new approaches to traditional issues of sex and gender, and you've heard about some of them today. We did a project with the New York Women's Foundation and their grantee partners. The lead scholar on that was Beck Jordan Young on reproductive justice. We then also did another project with Amber and QEJ called Desiring Change. And that sense of bringing together sex and gender as a new way, in new ways, to say these are the traditional topics of feminism, but we can think of them anew, is part of what this series is about. The other side of this coin, and I think you've heard some of this today, is that New Feminist Solutions also focuses on issues that are not always thought to have a gendered aspect, but that are sorely in need of new approaches that include a perspective on feminism and social justice. Over my years as director of BCRW, I have learned this simple and profound truth, that gender and sexuality, feminism and queer politics are crucial to any hope we might have for justice in our world. This seems so obvious when one looks at the work being done by all of the wonderful people who have done collaborative projects with BCRW, some of whom you've heard about today. And yet it flies in the face of so much one hears about feminism today. And this, I'm now going to, there's Desiring Change. And I'm now going to make fun of Time magazine for a while. Which is that this Time magazine in 2015 came out with a sense that we should ban feminism from our vocabulary. And I'm fascinated with Time magazine because they seem to desire to kill feminism repeatedly. And I do wonder if you have to kill it so often, how can it be so dead? So you see here covers from 1989 in which they say that feminism has no future, followed by a cover in 1998 in which they say feminism is definitely dead. In Gloria Steinem, they interviewed her in 2011. The first question is, isn't feminism dead? And now in 2015, having failed to kill feminism, they just want to ban it. I took up this question in the introduction to the 30th anniversary of the Scholar and Feminist Conference, in an essay I wrote called "Feminism is Dead, Long Live Feminism." And in researching these various declarations that feminism had long since died and comparing them to the apparent life, the vibrancy even of the conference, I wrote, quote, looking at all of the activity and excitement at this conference made me realize that if members of the mainstream press can't see this, then they must be looking for something else. Perhaps the press is looking for, feminism, for marches and rallies and bra burnings, which didn't happen in the way that they were shown, but nonetheless, we could still try to find them. And it has occurred to me that this feminism, the one locked in amber since the 1970s, might in fact never have been alive in the first place, or at least only in certain imaginations. Simply to assert the vitality of feminism, however, can't change the picture of what feminism was, what feminism is, or what feminism can be. And that has been some of the work that the Center has done over all of these years. Not only do expansive versions of feminism persist, as you have seen here today, but social justice feminism, as it has been named by Linda Burnham, continues to address a wide range of issues that the panels have addressed and that feminism continues to offer. And it continues to offer ideas for how to change the world for the better and, of course, to have more parks. And I do want to say just a few things in response to the day as a whole, and I have perhaps too many words here, so I'm going to try to just say them as succinctly as I can. And part of what I think has been wonderful about working at the Center is its early founding in 1971, so throughout all of what is called 70s feminism, I continue to see the ways in which that feminism, in all of its diversity, that's one of the things Working Alliance is about, is the ways in which 70s feminism was an incredibly diverse undertaking in terms of race, in terms of class, in terms of sexuality. Transnational feminism, we have all kinds of transnational journals from the 70s in our library. And bring that together with the issues that are of concern to our students here today and the activists that we work with. And I was very pleased that our current provost, Linda Bell, this morning said for you the mission of the Center, which is the other thing that I fall back on when I don't just say I'm Janet Jakobsen, I'm the director of the Barnard Center for Research on Women. I can say it very fast. Which is, again, to repeat it for you, the mission of the Center is to ensure that all women can live and work in dignity, autonomy, and equality. We didn't change that. That is the mission as it came to me. And certainly we've heard a lot about what those words might mean today, dignity in particular. And I also want to say that by all women, we mean all women. And this is a broad, somebody quoted from, it was Laura, from Working Alliances on the diversity and complexity of the category women, but I do want to name that for me this is a profound category. Not only do we believe that trans women are women, but I believe that butch women are women because I love a lot of butch women, many of whom are in the audience today, including Christina Crosby. And the rest of you know who you are. And pretty much I just want to say to anyone, if you want to be a woman, I say thank you and welcome to BCRW. And in relation to that, I also want to say, and one of the things that I saw today in a new way, and again I want to thank Tina's invocation of the idea of a feminist politics of conjunction, and this is another way to tell me and Anne Pellegrini apart. She can sing and I cannot. So if I were Anne Pellegrini, which I am not, Christina has taught me the subjunctive is for conditions contrary to fact, I would at this moment sing conjunction junction. But I am not Anne Pellegrini, so that will not happen. But the thing that came home to me most profoundly today was the ways in which the project that we hope for, that we aspire to, in saying that all women can live and work in dignity, and autonomy, and equality, is one that requires us to do something that is, again, an old feminist thing, but that is nonetheless necessary to say both and. So that to say not only are all women women, but also to think about the importance of gender variation and the ways in which we as feminists can embrace gender variation in the ways in which it flows, for example, through a life. My femme self is the product of Laura Levitt over here. The refusal also to simply participate in these categories. I think one of the most important things that's happening politically right now is just a refusal to say no. And I think that all of this, both the importance of valuing women and the importance of recognizing gender variation are part of what this feminist project that we've been talking about today is about. And I am very happy. Also, I was amazed at how often the word capacious was used today. It's a word I learned from Christina Crosby. You might know she's an English professor. But I think that the idea of that, and Tina raised this question again in the first panel, which is, can we produce a capacious feminism that is also specific and knows its limits, that doesn't try to take over the world in a new way? And that's part of what Oksana was talking about as well. And I think that that sense of being able to hold together both the breadth and capaciousness of what feminism might be, and also the specificity of knowing not only its limits and your need for allies who are different from you, and also where perhaps you shouldn't go. And the other thing that I have tried to hold on to in this both-and approach to a capacious and specific feminism is the ways in which we both must recognize the import of gender and sexuality and let it go. We must be ready to move beyond gender and sexuality at the same time. So there are so many conversations to which I bring, yes, we must think about sex, we must think about gender, and at the same time there are other conversations in which we have to say we need to let it go. And in fact, we moved on to the revolution right after lunch. So that was good. We can let it go. We're in the revolutionary world already, in a park. So we know, and this was one of the points that Lisa Dugan was making, that claims for feminism's irrelevance, so this often happens. So people move on from Feminism Dead to it's accomplished and now irrelevant. So these claims for feminism's irrelevance are unfounded because the idea of a division between the real issues and those of women's gender and sexuality studies is part of what sediments injustice. One of the central insights for me of working at the BCRW has been the ways in which feminism can contribute to broader movements and to alternative solutions. And this is part of what New Feminist Solutions was about. As I've often said of the Responding to Violence project, feminists have been thinking for 40 years about ways to respond to violence that don't involve bombing people. And perhaps these ideas could be helpful in a broad range of situations. In fact, the New Feminist Solutions project that we're working on now with Taloma and Saki for South Asian women is to think of ways of responding even to intimate violence without turning to the state's apparatus for inflicting more violence. This theme of not depending on the state's violence as a site of justice, and we've heard a lot about that today, which I appreciate very much, is also taken up by our BCRW activist fellow Raina Gossett, whose project No One is Disposable you heard referred to. And it challenges the idea that the best way to address violence is through a tremendously violent prison system. As Raina was talking about a conversation with transgender activist Cece McDonald, and she says in one of the video conversations, there's not enough mop and glow in all the world to make prisons safe for anyone. So why would we turn to that as our society's response to violence? And as Tina mentioned at the beginning, even as we gather here today, this question of violence and response requires our attention. And several speakers have mentioned this context, and I certainly want to raise up the Black Lives Matter movement as a way of trying to address the ways in which state violence extends into communities, and specifically communities of color across the US. Conversation about this movement has been somewhat challenging at Barnard. We put up Black Lives Matter, as did many people, on the BCRW bulletin boards frequently, and they were actually repeatedly taken down. And we were eventually get one to stay up by surrounding it with blue tape, which, for those of us who study religion, we were very satisfied that a symbolic movement could have a material effect. And this blue tape, for me at least, was also a contrast to the red tape that students had taken up when I first arrived. The No Red Tape movement here against sexual violence on campus was active in 2000 when I came and has been raised by students again. The Black Lives Matter movement has focused on gender in a number of ways. As activists have pointed out, police violence targets all genders: men, women, transgender and genderqueer people. And women have been leaders of the movement, including Alicia Garza, and I think she now works with NDWA. Where's Linda? Yeah. What the conference today and these brilliant speakers also encourage us to look at is not just at the gendering of violence or the activism, but at how the gendering prevents us from seeing possible alternatives to policing the world as a way to create peace. As I note in my own research, Is Secularism Less Violent Than Religion? All wars are fought for peace. And I've learned through these years of work with activists and academics in social justice movement that there is another way. This is from the Responding to Violence report. It's one of my favorite images from the report. For this image, I actually wanted to put up the list of policy alternatives, but Nietzsche Yin, who, as you saw, is an artist, convinced me this would be a more powerful image than a list of policy alternatives. But really, there is another way. And one of the things we've done over all these years at BCRW is to think of what those ways might be. And this means not just thinking about women and their place in the world, but understanding how sex and gender work. And I've learned a great deal from my students on this topic. I am teaching a course on gendered controversies, which has been a real pleasure. And one of the wonderful things about making this transition is I will then teach more, not less, at Barnard College. And the Barnard students are the most fabulous students in the world. And these students, yeah. And these students have been working in research teams on different issues and then presenting to each other and then writing about each other's presentations. It's been a very lively and enlivening class. And one group was focused on undoing the gender binary as a way of lifting some of the blocks to justice in our world. Some of the most exciting scholarship and activism today is being done around trans issue and gender variation. And one of the points of our statement on feminism, justice, and trans inclusion has been that trans inclusion is part of a feminist project. This is an imagination of feminism in which the goal is to create a world in which people are not bound into narrow gender categories that supposedly determine all kinds of things. This is one of the things that's amazing once you start thinking about gender. Gender is supposed to determine your work, your interests, your love, your sex, pretty much everything, apparently your food. And this is the kind of insight that Barnard students provide on a nearly weekly basis. Not every week is great, but nearly weekly basis. And I am particularly grateful to all the Barnard students, some of whom are here today, who have worked as BCRW research assistants and who have been in my classes. I really find that there is only one reason to have this job other than everything I've already said, which is working with you. And working with students at Barnard is not the only collaborative partnership that has made possible the work of BCRW over these 15 years, although the research assistants at BCRW are part of what makes the work that we do possible. In addition to the importance of, I don't know what I was going to say there. Oh, why sex? Why gender? The title of the conference. The second major takeaway from today for me is the importance of partnerships. From its beginnings in 1971, BCRW has focused on the connections between academic work done at Barnard and feminist activism in New York City and around the world. This is from the 40th anniversary of the center. So when I came to BCRW, it had such a well-established tradition of being at the forefront of both activism and research that one of my greatest fears was simply that I would muck it all up. I am forever grateful to my predecessors. Catherine Stimson was the acting director at the beginning, Jane Gould, the first permanent director, and she led the way in instituting the center's signature Scholar and Feminist Conference, and I want to thank others of our colleagues who are here who have been with us for a long time, who have worked on those conferences, Sue Sachs, Lila Brain, who is very much missed. I also want to thank the second director of the center, Tema Kaplan. When I started at this job, I would meet people from around New York and indeed from around the world. Tema works on Latin America, who had participated in one of Tema's working groups at the center. And they would say to me, you know, Tema changed my life. No pressure there. And of course, I want to thank Leslie Kalman, my immediate predecessor, who had the great generosity to still work with the center. She still works with us through her center course, which has now been underway for, I think, more than 25 years. And Angela Zito, also, who is my good colleague in religious studies, who was the acting director of the center when I was interviewing, and who kept the flame alive in the transition. The legacy, or perhaps more accurately, legacies created by these wonderful predecessors have been profound, and I have hoped to do my part in carrying them forward. But much remains to be done. As Jane Gould reports in her memoir, Juggling, a memoir of work, family, and feminism, the first public program held by the center was entitled, Is There Sexism at Columbia University? Jane reports, in what one can only see as a dry humor, it was an evening of high comedy. And of course, I've recited this title before, and it always elicits precisely the knowing laugh that just happened, because I know you are simply shocked to hear that there is still sexism at Columbia University. Nonetheless, we have done a lot to address it. The Scholar and Feminist Conference touched a nerve in 1974 when 2,000 people showed up, and it now continues 4 decades later. I'm not sure what the next picture is. That's not it. And it now continues 4 decades later, both in person and online. The center has always been a visionary site, a place not just for creating and sharing knowledge, but for asking what knowledge itself might look like if produced under more just conditions. And I want to, and again, this is about being both capacious and knowing your limits. I was very appreciative of what Joseph said on the last panel about knowing what you don't know. That one of the reasons that we work with activist collaborators is because knowledge is produced in many places. It's produced here, we like to think, and it's produced in all kinds of activist sites. And by coming together and knowing what you don't know and recognizing who you need to ally with, we can get better knowledge. For me, for a decade and a half, BCRW has consistently acknowledged both the staying power of oppressive and exploitative forces and the importance of working to frame questions differently, to nurture and develop new visions. If you search the website, you find materials from events like the following. Building Utopia. This photo is for Kim Hall. Toward a vision of sexual and economic justice. This one is Engendering Prisons, Engendering Justice. I'm afraid they're already engendered. Prisons, Activism, and Change. We've made a lot of change over these years. Polyphonic Feminism, Acting in Concert, which was co-edited by my good friend and longtime dialogue partner, Juliana Kabala. And there's a lot of acting, as well as a lot of vision, utopia, change. And perhaps most importantly, for the 40th anniversary of the Scholar and Feminist Conference, action on education. All of which leads, as you can see, to Utopia with artwork by Hope Decter. We chose action on education as the topic of the 40th anniversary of the Scholar and Feminist Conference because, of course, this is an educational institution, and one of the things that has been amazing over these years, including the years I have been here and the 40 years and now more of the center, is that it has been a both-and place for both action and education. A place to step back and think a minute, and a place to get things done. To do in-depth research and to make social change. To connect feminism and social justice, to teach and to do, to be a scholar and a feminist. And the good news for me about this transition is that marked by today, is that I will get to devote more of my time both to scholarship and teaching and to feminism. I will teach more here at the college, and I will also continue on as a research fellow at the center. I simply could not, that's a double negative, I could not work with the wonderful group of people that make up the center, the staff, my colleagues on the advisory board, our collaborative partners, both in community-based organizations in New York City and transnationally through the Transnational Feminisms Initiative. And so I stand before you today a tremendously grateful person. Grateful for 15 years of serious scholarship and feminist fun. This purse is our toolbox, given to us by Laura Levin, who has supplied much of the fun over the years. And perhaps it has sometimes a queer edge to it, like the toolbox purse. I am grateful to so many people that I cannot possibly name them all. But there are several who must be named, and I've hoped to mention many more along the way, and there are many, many more. So for everyone, I say thank you. I do want to say a special thanks to my family, who is over here today, my brother Tom, my niece Emily and Craig, their partners Ryan and Nikki. Education was the primary value in Tom's and my household when we were growing up. such that my grandmother Jakobsen went to every graduation by anyone in the family for as long as she lived. The last one was very satisfying. Our uncle Robert was a research scientist, but he had failed out of the University of Kansas. He became spectroscopist of the year. They had to give him an honorary degree. She got to go back and see him finally graduate from the University of Kansas. All right. I'm honored to have them here along with friends from college, from Dartmouth, from graduate school, and many of my former students, including one who was in my very first feminist theory class at the University of Arizona and now works in New York. I must necessarily thank my lover, Christina Crosby, for all that she has done for me over the course of these years, including getting me to apply for the job in the first place. There were many enticements, Ann Pellegrini, Asana Najmabadi, Tally Campen, but Christina convinced me that it was the right one for me. And then she read my introductions and edited them in the early years. When we were to name our skills, she named editing as hers in the lunchtime exercise. That, of course, was back when I wrote introductions. Now things are so busy, I mostly just get up here and talk. So count yourselves lucky that not only did I write this down, but she edited it before it comes to you. And she gives me the most sage advice at any and every point of difficulty and challenge. These points are all to the good, but they hardly begin to describe Christina Crosby. Many of my friends and a couple of panelists have noted that this event is occurring on May Day, hence the revolution right after lunch. And we have seen a certain consonance between the aspirations of the Barnard Center for Research on Women and the Viva la Revolution sense of the 1st of May. And certainly that consonance has made me happy. But this day and the month of May also make me think of Christina in particular. I met Christina while I was on the faculty of the University of Arizona, and I came to the center, Wesleyan's Center for the Humanities, as a fellow. We had offices next door. And in May of that year, as I prepared to return to the desert, my friends report that I went on with some frequency and at some length about the miracle of photosynthesis. Looking at you, Elizabeth Costelli. She had to listen to a lot of that. It was perhaps not an inaccurate rendering of my experience in Connecticut. There are trees, leaves on the trees in Arizona. There are trees and there are leaves on them. But the leaves tend to be really, really small. And so I was amazed to see maple leaves that I would say, as big as my hand. In their great patience, my friends also gently suggested that perhaps what I found miraculous was not the leaves, but, well, love. As a religious studies scholar, I try not to use religious language, or to do so, I try to use religious language only advisedly. But in the case of the difference that Christina Crosby has made in my life, I have to say, and to say with all of my scholarly authority, that religious language is applicable here. Christina Crosby is a miracle in and of herself and in my life, and for that I thank her. Here at Barnard, I must thank my longtime colleagues in what is now called Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, Tally Campen, who is much missed, and who really was not only a mentor and everything a mentor should be, but she was also a role model about how to be a mentor. And I remain grateful for everything that she's done for me. Afsana Najmabadi, whose brilliance you heard here today, the aforementioned Ann Pellegrini, Nefertiti Tadiar, Rebecca Jordan-Young, and Elizabeth Bernstein. And now my colleagues in the Consortium for Critical Interdisciplinary Studies, of which WGSS is a part, and which we hope will formally become connected to BCRW next year. The steering committee, in addition to Beck Jordan-Young, consists of Kayama Glover, Jenny Kasanoff, and Yvette Christianza. Yvette is also a faculty fellow with the Transnational Feminism Initiative, as is Shayoni Mitra, and we're very grateful to them. And to our activist fellows, our senior activist fellows, Catherine Acey and Amber Halaba, our activist fellows, Reina Gossett, Taloma, Jaya Singha, our research scholars, Courtney Howland and Henry Avelov. Today you saw the talents of the alumni fellows, Sidney Mosley, Ebony Smith, Ali Rosasales, and Nietzsche Yen. I do, with most sincerity, want to thank all of the student workers at BCRW Everyone, and I mean really everyone on the BCRW Advisory Board. There's 60 people, and I won't make you sit through all the names, but I do mean everyone. I do want to have special thanks for Nefertiti Tadiar and Elizabeth Costelli, who served as acting directors in 2008 and 2011 and 12, respectively. And Elizabeth also joined Kim F. Hall in forming my affinity group. I went to a conference, the Queer Dreams Conference, and they said in order to survive, to have your life be sustainable in an institution that might not always have your interests at heart, is there sexism at Columbia University? You needed an affinity group. So I came back from this conference and I told Elizabeth and Kim that they were now my affinity group. They did not protest too much. And they helped actually tremendously in forming this transition, particularly over one dinner that we had with Elizabeth's wonderful cooking. I would also like to thank Deborah Spar and Linda Bell, the current president and provost of Barnard College, who have brought their support to the center. And they have particularly done a great job in making this transition possible in a way that will be incredibly positive for the future of the center. And then I must say there is something special about the current BCRW staff. Every configuration of the staff has been special. This is Liz and David with Christina at the 30th anniversary of the center. This is last year's with Catherine Sammy, Pam Phillips, me, Hope Decter. This small person is Mector Decter, although he's grown a lot since then. I understand he's now going by Mercer, and Ann Jonas. But this group, the group that I'm working with now, is really, really special. Really, they're special. Also, really, there is another way. And you see them, Tammy Navarro, Nietzsche Yin, Che Gossett, that's me, Ann Phillips, Ann Jonas, Pamela Phillips, and Hope Decter, who used to be a cheerleader. Hence, her high kick is much better than mine. Hope has worked at BCRW for 13 of my 15 years. And her talents have literally remade the center as a site that is as alive in the digital age and through digital media as it was in 1971. Hope is not a words person. She literally counts my syllables in the titles for events. And so I offer her this image. It's Ron saying, I don't know if I can make it go again. There's been so much change, and I've never been a fan of change. Hope is also not a fan of change. I once wrote in her annual review, Hope is adjusting to change well. Or you had improved in that category, maybe, I'm not sure. And today only, Hope, I have to agree, that though we work for a center dedicated to social change, just for today, it's a bittersweet thing. I owe a very, 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 very special thanks to Ron, to Tina Campt, whose willingness to step in as director allows me to step away. Were she not a person of vision, someone who will take BCRW to new and unexpected places, and I look forward to going to those places with her, I would not be able to make this change. But because I know the center is in good hands, I can not only step away, I can do so happily. When we had the first advisory board of the transition, I literally jumped up and spun around in the air. In the fall, this past fall, when I introduced Tina as co-director of the center, I turned to my history of running track and used the metaphor of a relay race to describe the year of passing the baton, and that metaphor remains entirely apt. The baton came to me from Kate, Jane, Tema, and Leslie, and I am now very honored to pass it on to Tina. One of the most things in running first in the relays, my favorite event was the relays, and I ran first, both in high school and college, was after I passed the baton, I would stand in my lane, breathing hard from the effort of running full speed for an entire 100 meters. I once got a letter from my coach that said to the hardworking members of the track team and Stephanie and Janet. So there I was, standing on the track, breathing hard, and watching my teammates carry on, cheering them with the rest of the crowd, and also with that extra special sense of being part of the team. This type of teamwork has always been the most important thing about working life to me, and so I'm happy that I get to remain part of the team, even if from the other side of the track, or in this case, from an office upstairs. And so it is with real pleasure, perhaps mixed with some sadness, but also with great relief, that I say, for the last time, I am Janet Jakobsen, and I am the director of the Barnard Center for Research on Women. Thank you. And thank you for coming. Oh, wait. This is the future of the center. By the way, Nietzsche is the highest one over here.